All right, once again, we are here at Publicize talking about 10 steps to prepare your startup into the mainstream. My name, for you all to know, it's Eddie Arrieta. I'm the president and co-founder at Publicize and Espacio. You can see my email. You can see my contact information. Please make sure to connect with me right after this webinar at Publicize. We work with startups from a wide range of industries. These companies come from all over the world, and we focus on PR strategies and tactics that are specifically geared towards growth. Growing your user and client base requires specific steps, and we're hoping to provide some insight into that today. If you want to learn more about this, check out the resources center on our website. We have just shared that in the chat section, but let's get to business. The key outcomes of this webinar today are around how do you move your audience from early adopters to late majority. How can PR help you do that? How the right press can help you grow your leads, sales, and revenue. How do you achieve mainstream acceptance with powerful PR? And we're going to be sharing some practical tips, tools, and resources to help your startup at any stage. And we have, of course, a magic guest that's going to come at the very end of this presentation. So stay tuned, and we're going to get to that. Here's the contents, and you can, of course, read that. We have a lot of ground to cover today, but we'll make progress on these conversations. But before we get started, let's put some context to the actual conversation we are having. How many of you have seen this? What is it saying? The area we want to focus on is the early majority and late majority. That's where the money is, and that's where PR comes in. As a quick note, this is what the 10 steps we will be talking about are aiming at. How do we go from early adopters to early majority and late majority? That's, once again, the area under the curve that represents the number of customers that is adopting or taking onto your services or products. Let's continue. Step number 1, and just as a note for everyone who is listening, we're going to be sending this presentation to your email right after the webinar. So if you want to share it with your friends, if you want to share it with other entrepreneurs, we will be sending it over to your email. Step number 1, matching your business objectives with your PR objectives. So first things first, before you start mapping out your PR strategy or brainstorming announcements and targeting media outlets, what you need to have clear in your mind is your business objectives. They need to be well defined. Thankfully, this is something that most startups and other companies will already have in some form or another. So think about your business plans or your commercial strategy. Where do you want your business to be in 6 or 12 months from now? Take a look at the list we are providing here. Do any of these apply to you? Do a few of them apply to you? This is the starting point of our conversation. We cannot move forward if we are not clear on what business goals you are trying to achieve. I once learned that action without a plan is wasted energy. Well, we are trying to make sure we have a solid starting point to any PR activities we do. So sometimes you might be thinking that you need to get out of the gate, secure some funding, maybe attract some new funding. You want to sell your business, you want to attract talent, you want to increase your user base. Those are some examples of business objectives. If you are not certain about your business goals or even your business strategies, let us know. We have world-class talent at Publicize that can provide very powerful insight on getting your business strategy and objectives set up. In turn, you will need to think about which PR activities help achieve such business objectives. And the reality is that over time, you will need to use a number of tactics to achieve your objectives. New types of tactics will arise, and new technologies and communication channels will appear. And ideally, we should be able to pair the right tactics with adequate business objectives. These PR objectives directly align with your business objectives. Many times, companies will consider their business goals without looking at PR. The reality is the two are linked and can drive each other. So think about what tactics can help you get there. Is it going to be media mentions, perhaps thought leadership, industry awards, events, hosting? And once again, If you're not certain about which tactics to use, let us know. Our amazing team will be able to help in this regard. Just send us a quick email to info@publicize.co or send me a message, eddie@publicize.co. I'm very approachable and I can help you with this. Of course, as you can see in this example, if you, for instance, have the goal of growing your user base, you have to think about what's required to get there. Think about it. In this specific case, we would need credibility, which can be obtained from earned media, awareness, which is possible from product reviews on sites such as Product Hunt. Finally, value perception, which is the way in which people can perceive your value when they see you online. Think about people searching for you online and going to your website. How do they perceive your value? So this example is really good because you can see the progression. You can see how your goal of growing customers or your user base requires something specific. And when you think about that, then you can think about credibility, awareness, value perception, which in turn will tell you and inform the tactics that you need to perform to get PR. On to the next step, step number 2. Let's figure out your narrative. So let's get this out of the way. Journalists don't really care about your product. There are a few things they will be looking into, and you need to be very aware of those. Is there a fascinating backstory? Is there a deep and personal connection between your company and your product? Is there an industry old hand? We had one of our clients who we didn't think their product was very amazing until he told us that he thought about it when he was traveling in the jungles of the Amazon for a few months. That is a fascinating backstory if you're thinking about your business while you're traveling in the Amazon. If any of you is interested in traveling to the Amazon, just let us know. We also have people in the team that can help you with that, probably. There is already a lot out there. So whatever things you think you do well, someone is thinking about it or is already doing it different or better. So differentiating is a critical part of this process. What is your hook? So when you have been thinking about the backstory, when you have been thinking about that industry old hand, we need to be thinking about how that makes you different. What is your hook? What is the thing that your customers see in you that allows them to say, aha, once you recognize these elements, we can and should find a way to package it. So stop selling, start storytelling. It sounds cliche, but this couldn't be more real. Having a story around a good business model will just make your life so much easier as an entrepreneur. Having a clear narrative will allow you to do this, but this doesn't come from words you say. It comes from carefully thinking about the elements that constitute your narrative. So, to the next step. But before that, remember, we're going to be sending this over email to every single one of you. So if you want to read some of these slides in much more detail, we will be able to send those. The reason why we are not stopping in all of them is because we have 10 steps to go, and we are in step number 3. So reach your audience. The basic exercise here is to put yourself in the shoes of those who are willing to use your services. Why are people buying your product? What are their motivations? And this applies to products, services, consultants. Why are people hiring you? What is it that you are providing that they need? And watch out here. It's not what you think they need from you. It's not what you think your value is. It is what your users and customers think your value is. So do an exercise similar to this. So we're going to do some audience research. And from a Publicize standpoint, we'll be putting ourselves in the shoes of one of the founders or an entrepreneur. So as a founder of a tech startup, and that's the who, and we find the situation when I'm looking about how to grow my company, then we find the motivation. I want to keep cost low and results high, and then we have a desired outcome. So I can build and improve my product more effectively. So I recently came across an example that really helped me think about this. And is when you're buying a drill, why do you buy that drill? And it's very interesting because it's not because of the noise. It's not because of the exercise that you have or that you're doing when you're holding the drill in your hands. It's because of the desired outcome, right? So the desired outcome in this case would be to drill a hole, maybe in the wall, maybe in a piece of wood. But that is the desired outcome. So you don't buy the drill just because it's a heavy piece of machinery. So think about that exercise, and perhaps you can come up with other results for yourself. Now, once again, the exercise here is to understand why users use your product, use your service, use your consultation. Ask the questions and then listen. So we can go deeper into this. What are their interests? What apps and services would they use? How much time do they have to read about their interests and whatnot? Once again, you will get all these slides so you can get into much more detail about this. On to step number 4. This is housekeeping, and this is one of my favorite as well. This step refers really to our ability to understand the foundation of our business's needs in order to go beyond early adopters. So we need to think about our website, think about our social media channels, think about our branding, think about local citations. So when you're thinking about your website, does the design of this website stand up to the competition? Does it look clean? Does it look good? Is it optimized for getting your users engaged with your content, engaged with the call to actions that you have in there? Your social media channels. Are you using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter properly? First of all. Second of all, do you need to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Sometimes companies will have an Instagram account and they don't even need an Instagram account. You need to have and use the social media with you. So you need to be very aware of what you are using. So if you are in the tech industry, have you set up, for example, a Crunchbase profile, which is very powerful for us tech startups? In terms of your branding, have you established and formalized your brand? Is it clear across different communications channels? You would see this with a lot of early stage companies, and is their Twitter account will look very different to their Facebook account, look very different to their Instagram. The message will be very different to what the founder has written on LinkedIn. They will not have a Crunchbase. Their website will look significantly different from anything that they have across. So all that consistency across different channels is going to be very important for your branding. Finally, of course, if you are a business that's location specific, have you started adding your business to local directories and listings online? You know, the great thing about all of this is that you can do it really quickly. So you can get it done much quicker than you might think. And you can move yourself ahead of the curve a lot and very, very quickly, because most companies do not think about this and do not make the steps to make sure that they've got their house in order. So on to step number 5. One quick note: if you have any questions about anything that I'm mentioning, just put it on the chat or put it on the ask questions format. We will be answering all of the questions that you have at the very end of this presentation. So I think we're having issues with our presentation that's not moving to step number 5. But as we are solving this, I will move on to the content just to make sure that we are moving ahead. So once you've completed your own media housekeeping, you can move on to SEO. So these days, PR and SEO go hand in hand. In fact, at Publicize, we say that PR is the secret weapon of SEO. To succeed with SEO, you basically need great content and high quality backlinks. For great content, we might be thinking about blog posts, we might be thinking about guides. For high quality backlinks, we need links from media publication websites or companies that are larger than ourselves. And natural outputs of PR are what? Great content, the media coverage. So great content such as guest blogs and original research, it's part of that natural output that PR creates. It's very powerful for SEO. The media coverage mentions often come with backlinks that will allow you to get those authority website authority much higher. So let's get on to the next slide. In order to leverage your PR to the benefits of your website's SEO, you need to combine your content strategies. Firstly, you need to be producing quality content on your site that's intended to capture search, such as insightful and original blog posts, in-depth guides, and original research. This then informs the type of things you pitch to the media, as you want to gain backlinks from your earned media wins into this content. For example, you could pitch guest posts to high authority sites where you discuss a topic that's related to some of your blog's posts. This then enables you to place contextual and editorially relevant backlinks to this content. For Publicize in particular, we should be pitching content to high authority sites about PR, about marketing, and our digital marketing. So you could also publish your research on your site and then send down your findings via press release. Journalists can then write your research findings up into articles and will often include backlinks to the original research you publish on your site. As you can see, PR can become that secret weapon for your SEO strategy. And now on to step number 6, inbound content. So how exactly do you use own media content to build trust with your audience? Your blog will be the foundation for this. A number of studies in the US have shown a consistent preference among consumers that they prefer to learn about company or about a company and its products through its blogs rather than through advertisements. That's pretty easy to understand, right? Well, firstly, you should be developing personalized content that educates users about how your product can solve some of their existing problems and pain points they have with financial products or with any sort of the products that you are creating. In the example that we're presenting here, we are talking about a training software company. So if you are a PR company like we are, we have to be talking about marketing products. In the example, this is part of what you need to be showing to the companies that come to you. What does your solution provide to the companies? And are you presenting this on the website? In this case, they are including a training center with a manual sample and even more information. So that really hits on how the problem can solve some of the target market's problems. And in addition to this, you should also be focusing on building deeper relationships, providing complementary content to address the ones on other needs that your audience has and that aren't specific to your product. Let's use these FreshBooks as an example. They provide content that's aimed at other pain points that their target market may have, that goes beyond what their product alleviates. This includes a guide for freelancers to calculate their rate and steps on how businesses can future-proof themselves. This type of content marketing is a great example of how companies can build trust and deeper relationships with their audience by showing how well they know their target market along with its wants and needs. And this is something that's not particular to, or this is something that I believe is particularly to not just every industry, but it as a tactic will determine the type of content that you would create. So here's an example from SEO Moz, one of the biggest digital marketing companies in the world. Here they are producing own media content that's providing analysis on their market to show their credentials and expertise to their audience on topics such as SEO and content marketing. If you go to their site, you'll probably see this. If you go to the Publicize Resource Center, this is something that you will also be able to see. And finally, don't forget to use your own media content for customer success story. This, again, is a great way to build trust in the eyes of your audience. In this example, business lender Lenderfield, who also took part in one of our researches, and we will be able to share that with you later, provide customer success stories in their own words, where they explain what the benefits of working with Lenderfield were over traditional forms of lending. Now let's move on to one of my favorite, media monitoring. This is step number 7. So we have several tools that we are recommending that you use to make sure that you do media monitoring. And media monitoring can be also understood as newsjacking. And newsjacking can be done through constant media monitoring. So you can start looking into upcoming topics and discussions in media to make sure that you understand where the conversations are at. So some of the things that you can use are Google Alerts. So some basic functionalities will provide you with a high level of overview. Talk Walker Alerts, Twitter Advanced Search, Hootsuite, Mention, and Quora. In particular, we have been testing and actually experimenting a lot with Quora in the past few months in the company, and the level of engagement in there is amazing, especially for B2B. So we highly recommend that you go to Quora, start looking at the questions that people are putting in there about your industry, and start pumping out some answers in there if you really know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, then we don't recommend you do that, really. Step number 8, creating the perfect pitch. And creating the perfect pitch is very, very important. We got a great resource called Pitching to Journalists, the complete how-to guide. We are sharing this in the chat right now. This also features a toolkit with example pitches that you can use to create your own. What you will see there is that we have used the subject line to draw the editor's attention in. Furthermore, we have clearly stated that this is a guest post, basically what we are trying to present to that editor, and we use the phrase exclusive content. This is because we know that journalists like original, fresh content. So there are a few insights from what you will see in this resource. We use the journalist's first name, for example. We get straight to the point of the email. We are presenting a problem with diversity within the industry, and we introduce our clients, talk up and their social proof. We reiterate the exclusivity of the content. This is going to be original content. This is also good exercise for you in terms of the art of actually pitching. Ask yourself the following question. Does it waste the journalist's time? If they are reading this, are they wasting their time, or is this actually very interesting for them? Does it include stats, facts, and figures? Does it go through the key takeaways? Does it highlight the expertise of the company? Does it have any trust signals? And it's very interesting because some of the people that actually pitch to journalists don't take even a second to understand why a journalist might or might not cover what they are trying to pitch to them. So the first exercise I would recommend to you is, before you pitch a journalist, go to their Twitter account, go to their profile or their author profile, and figure out what they actually write about. If you're pitching someone who covers AR, a different product, let's say crypto, it's going to be very unlikely they will cover that. So remember, we got a great resource called Pitching to Journalists, the complete how-to guide, and we've put it in the chat. If you want to refer to it, I think you will learn a lot from it. And on to step number 9, publication analysis. So do a Google News search of each of your competitors' company names and note the publications, reporters, and topics of any outlets that's relevant to your buyer's persona. So for similar web, review all the sites listed under the similarity tab and add all of those that are relevant to your buyer personas. Now, you'll have an extensive list of publications that are relevant to your buyer personas. However, it is the individual journalists and reporters who are working at these publications that you want to contact rather than the publications themselves. So lastly, repeat the same process using Hey Press and News Tips, which are good tools to finding journalists grouped by network or keyword. And as an added bonus, the free version of Hey Press even provides a limited amount of contact details. I cannot emphasize this further. You might get a list of journalists, you might get a list of publications, and think that all you need to do is write the email and send it out. It goes beyond that. If you don't understand why they might write what you need to write, then it's very unlikely that you're going to get results. Really take the time to understand why these reporters or these journalists will cover the content that you're trying to share. Make sure that there is a correlation between your story and then the people that you're finding using these tips. So finding the publication is not everything that you need to do. It's a good step, but you need to make sure that there is an actual correlation. We are adding in this slide some of the other things that you can use, like BuzzSumo, to see what kind of content is getting traction. You can use Hunter and Cision to look at the exact email addresses. If you don't have a subscription for Cision, well, you're going to have to pay them to get that. Or do your research, Google them, and try to contact them. Twitter is also one of the great places to find this information. And on to our last step. Step number 10, iterate on your social proof. So we prefer to think of PR as something like this. It's not a one size fits all, and it's not something you could do once for success. A lot of people come to us asking if they can be featured in TechCrunch or Forbes. In reality, successful PR looks like this. It's a gradual build up over time where your key audiences get to know you and your story. So this graph is something that our team has worked with to strategically think about the way in which we can get PR. As you can see at the very bottom, we're talking about foundation materials, media monitoring, strategy creation, master media lists, and whatnot. As a matter of fact, when we are talking to our clients, we're talking about the baseline work we can do for them. We talk about establishing a PR strategy. We talk about analyzing outreach strategies. We talk about the keystone documents that you need to be creating there. We have to be thinking about how we're going to be reporting or responding to potential journalists that want to work with us. So as you can see here, to grow your success and to actually connect your PR goals with your business objective goals, you are going to need to do a lot of work. And these 10 steps are looking into specifically doing that for you. Well, we have got into the 10 steps of our presentation and our webinar. Let me remind you that we're going to be sending you this presentation, but now we're actually going to get to talk to one of our experts. His name is Stuart Martins, Senior Account Manager here at Publicize. You can see his contact information. He's also very approachable, but we're going to start asking him some questions regarding PR and regarding the 10 steps we have just gone over. So we have 2 questions to begin with, but like we said earlier, use the chat of our webinar and also use the ask questions functionality of Crowdcast to ask us questions. We have a bunch of right now. So Short, welcome to our webinar. This is your debut. He's not ready. So the first question we're going to be going over with Short once he's ready to do this, is going to be, what are the biggest challenges that startups face when creating a PR strategy? We're also going to be asking him, what are some tips and advice you would give to an early stage startups looking to get the word out there for the first time? So we have just sent Short an invitation to join us and hopefully be able to answer this. All right, there you are.
Hi there. Hi, Eddie. Thanks for the introduction. That was very good. So yeah, what are the challenges that startups face as soon as they kind of get into PR? When do they feel ready? It's probably like the first question that they probably have themselves. At least that's when they come to us. When am I ready for PR? When should I actually start doing PR? And how? Like, where do I start? What is the first thing that I want to do? What do I need to have in order to kind of start reaching out to the media? And as soon as we start doing that, like, how fast can I actually go from that point? So that's obviously like you covered a lot of that already, Eddie, in your presentation. You need to have your website up to date. You need to make sure that people know where to find you. And as soon as they do, is all of the information you have there completely set up for you to go. As soon as you feel ready for getting into PR, the first thing that you want to do is to actually kind of set up a plan. How am I going to reach out to the media? What am I going to go for? And obviously, in order to kind of assess that first, you need to know, what are my business objectives? What do I want to do first? Do I want to do PR because I have an announcement, or do I actually want to do PR because I have certain business goals that I want to attain, and I know that PR might be able to help me with that? So as soon as you kind of find that out, you set yourselves up to kind of get started on a strategy. But the good thing to do and to note with PR is to always make sure that you know that failure should always be seen as a lesson. And as soon as you kind of find out things that are working or not working, you kind of like move that in back to your kind of strategy.
Thank you very much for that. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and it's related to these challenges, you have managed a lot of campaigns and startups throughout the years. ballpark, what percentage of them actually come ready with, we have 10 steps there. How many of them actually you receive them and you say like, whoa, you're actually ready to go?
That is actually a good question. It's one of the first things that we always assess, and the client himself or themselves actually don't really know as good when they are ready to kind of do that. So I think if we're kind of talking about a ballpark, it definitely depends on kind of like how ready they are, what kind of stage are they. But I'd say like, yeah, at least half don't really know where to start and when they really want to get into PR.
Okay, and the second question we had there for you was what were some of the tips and advice that you could give on early stage startups looking to get the word out there? I'm gonna add something to that. So I'm a startup. I want to get the word out there. I don't have any money short. What can I do?
If you don't have any money, then obviously you want to do it yourself and keep as much in-house. So what you want to do is you want to find out what is going to be working for me as a company, as an individual, as an entrepreneur. So based on that kind of assessment, you then have to kind of set up a few campaigns, set up a few different kind of methods of reaching out to the media and find out what works. Do you have an interesting backstory to tell? Let's use that. Do you have a very disruptive, innovative product? Let's do that. It might also be that you have none of the two, but you actually have a very good way of responding to what's happening in the news. You might then use that and use your company as a legitimacy to actually talk about those topics. So if you don't have any money, no worries. There's still lots of ways that you can actually get into PR and kind of start building relationships with the media through kind of finding out what works for you. Background, story, company, yourself, or something happening in the news that you feel comfortable talking about yourself.
Excellent. So I have some questions from our audience. Question number one is from Sean. I think it's a very interesting question. What do you do if your backstory isn't fascinating? So basically, you're a boring dude or girl. Like, so you're so boring that your backstory is just some simple. I went to school, then I went to college, I graduated, and then here I am. What do you do, man?
Good question. I feel that a lot of our clients feel that. The funny thing is that there's always going to be a good story behind an individual. So that's definitely something that we always assess whenever we have a new client moving and starting using our services. But if you don't really want to think about that, and if we set that aside a little bit, what if you don't have an interesting background story? You start focusing on something else. Maybe there's something about your product that really is disrupting the industry. Maybe there's something happening in the news that you can take advantage of, or maybe it's going to be more of a numbers game and kind of reaching out to people within the industry and finding out if anyone has the interest in covering your kind of company. I'd say that if you really don't have a interesting background, then you better be sure that your company has something interesting to say. But obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, you always have to make sure that your business has some unique selling points so that you can kind of start getting attention from your clients. And if you can get attention from clients or prospect clients, then you can also kind of assume that there's going to be people in the media industry that also want to find out more about your company.
Great. I have a second question then from Sam, and this is related to the stage in which your startup is at. So if you're a young startup, is it better for you to pitch to large publications or niche publications?
That's a good question, actually. And there is no right answer to kind of answer that question before you actually try and find out. I think that a lot of ways of working with PRs is definitely going to be trial and error. So as you're a young company, it might be that like the larger publications might be very interested in covering your story or your company, but it might also be that they find out that you don't have any experience or any kind of legitimacy in the media industry because no one has covered you before. So if you start working with PR and you start doing campaigns, it's always interesting to find out what does work for me, like how much traction can I get, and then move from there. For example, let's say you start doing your first campaign. Obviously, it's going to be very interesting to find out that if a larger publication let's say a Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch might be able to kind of cover your story, you can also ask yourself, like, what is the probability that that is actually going to happen? Do you want to try and find out? Absolutely. Like, there's nothing against that. However, you should also kind of understand and kind of realize yourself that if you start doing PR and you find yourself in a position where no one is picking up your stories because you're a very young entrepreneur or have like a very young startup, or is it because you don't have any media attention, or journalists might drop out because they don't have any kind of legitimacy online, or they can't find any articles that have been published before. So I'd say that as soon as you start doing those first kind of rounds of outreach, it's definitely kind of interesting to find out, like, do things work for me, or don't they? And based on the fact that niche publications do have a little bit more of a higher probability of covering your stories, I'd also say that in the first kind of campaigns that you do yourself, it's always good to have like a broad overview of kind of the entire spectrum of top tier publications, mainstream, local, and also niche publications regarding your industry or your kind of like product or service offering.
Okay, I want to dig a little bit deeper into this because it's related to one of the steps that we were talking about. We were talking about finding publications. So could you tell me a little bit more about how you understand and divide the tiers of publications? So like, what's a major publication? What's a mid-tier publication? What's a niche publication? So people, I mean, we're hearing niche publication here and there, but we might not know what that is.
Definitely. So it's probably easiest to kind of have like a top-down approach yourself. I think that all entrepreneurs have their preferred kind of publications that they really want to go for. So, for example, if you have like a tech startup, then obviously like lots of clients, at least they come to us asking about TechCrunch. So that is something that I think all can agree that that's kind of like top tier. What would be then like mid-tier publications? That's kind of like difficult for clients or for our clients or entrepreneurs to kind of assess themselves, because they don't really know what they would kind of qualify as a mid-tier publication or how much of an impact that would have. Obviously, from us, from years of doing PR and having that experience, we can kind of like make an assessment there, but I would also say it's very relative. So it might be that you want to have more conversions or more leads coming in for your business, and you would make a list of publications and you'd say like, okay, the top 50 I would consider as tier 1, the 100 below that is tier 2, and the rest is tier 3. It might be that you would have like articles published in these different tiers, but still find out that the tier 3 publications have more of an impact to you than others. However, like, to answer kind of the second part of your question, when it comes to like niche publications, you can always kind of like make a division about niche publications that are really like pinpoint to one specific topic or one specific kind of industry. So you would know that they are most likely to kind of cover your startup because you know that you operate in the same industry, basically. So that's why we kind of like make a distinction between mainstream publications and very targeted niche publications. And even in that kind of division, you can also make another assessment of like, how big of an impact do I think this will have on my business if I do get an article or published about my startup in that publication.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I presume that from the portfolio of people that you work with and that you have worked with, there are several different industries. Can you give me some examples of some of those industries that you would say, hey, this is very specific? I've worked on fintech. Like, what types of industries would you have you seen there?
Definitely. So I'd say that when it comes to different kind of industries, obviously there's kind of like general business where lots of entrepreneurs can always go to kind of share advice. But you might also have like industries related to what your service or product actually does. So it might be that you have a fintech company that does something with blockchain. We know from experience that blockchain, especially right now, is such a buzzword that if you want to get a lot of traction of kind of your blockchain startup, then a blockchain or fintech kind of publications is definitely kind of a good like specific kind of publication that you want to have in your list of outreach. When it comes to like other kinds of industries, we know that, for example, like medtech is obviously something that is very niche, very specific. So if you have a company that works in that industry, it's good to kind of focus on that opposed to just tech in general. But obviously, there's like tons of divisions you can make. It could be related to like consumer lifestyle kind of products. It could be related to fintech. As I said, it could be whatever.
Excellent. I have a really good question from Mark. And he's saying, when we're talking about earned media, what other kinds of wins can a startup receive besides guest posting? So we're talking about earned media. Besides guest posting, what other kinds of wins can you get?
Indeed, that's a good question. In terms of what other kind of earned media you can get with through PR, that is something that kind of relates to what you do as well. So, for example, if you know that you have a certain kind of product or a service offering and you want to have it like possibly like reviewed, then you might reach out to like the publications that you know that have like a top 50 or like top virtual phone systems, for example, and get your company listed in that list. It might also be that you have like a fun idea of the 5 different business software solutions that you as an entrepreneur should have, and you kind of divide that into the one is communication, one is regarding like incoming calls, the other one is regarding like CRM system. You could then make a list and include your company as one of the companies within one of those different kind of breakdowns, basically. That's a different one. Obviously, like earned media, it could be that you push out a press release and that a journalist is actually interested in covering your story and wants to do a little bit more of a background story. So they might engage with you in conversation and actually write a company profile about you. And it might happen that while you're on the phone with the journalist, they actually ask you about your kind of like your journey to how you got to that specific point, and they write up a story that they feel is a lot more focused about you as an entrepreneur opposed to your kind of company.
Great. And now I have a really tough question for you. And this is from Rudy, who has asked a couple of questions, but it is about measuring results. And he's asking, how do you recommend measuring the effectiveness of content you publish on your own site in terms of customer engagement? I don't think we can hear you.
Yeah, you are right, Eddie. I'm sorry. Thanks for that. That was a great question. I'd say that you can always assess kind of the SEO benefit of kind of your blogs, etc., using like keyword trackers in SEMrush or Moz to see if the content is capturing the keywords. You should also definitely kind of monitor the traffic by landing pages in Google Analytics to see which pages are onboarding users into your site. The pages report is also important as it shows how many of your users are viewing your content and how long they spend on your website or that specific page. You can also track which type of content gets the most engagement on social media. So when you post on there, this helps to kind of determine what type of content you should focus on based on kind of the statistics and analytics you get from your social media platforms. I'd also say that the gated content is also important, where you need to kind of provide contact details to assess it so that you can measure kind of the downloads and how popular it is.
Thank you. And I'm just gonna, because I think it's related to the question, because Rudy also asked, so when you're looking at publications, I mean, you're thinking that you want them to have the biggest impact when you get that result. Do you actually look at the DA score for choosing a publication, so the domain authority?
Definitely, it's a great kind of tool to assess whether or not you want to go for that publication when you kind of do your outreach strategy. It depends also on what is your business goal. Is SEO driving traffic? Is SEO important? Do you need people to land on your page so that from there they might be able to kind of buy your product, buy your service? If that's not really the case, then obviously the domain authority doesn't really matter too much. So for example, you might have an application you're not as interested in people actually going to your website, from which obviously they can also download the application, but you might also want to have an article on one of the larger publications that talks about your application in this sense, and then from there they might be able to go directly to the App Store and download the product there. So obviously that's kind of like a different assessment that you need to make as an entrepreneur yourself, in order to kind of find out, is SEO important to me, and if so, obviously then domain authority is important, so that you can kind of find out if this specific kind of publication will help me in order to kind of like grow my SEO value and build link equity.
And of course, as we saw in one of our steps, SEO should and it's important to you, so you need to be paying attention to that. So I have one of the questions from Jeff, and it gets us back to the original conversation we were having about, when a company is not ready for PR, like what are the things that we should do. So Jeff is asking, what should you do for PR if your product or service is yet to launch? Is there such a thing as like pre-PR? Is it necessary, or should you just wait until full launch to show off your business? What would you do, or what would you recommend?
That's an interesting question, actually. So if I would give an example of one of my clients that decided after signing up with us to actually extend their pre-launch phase and not go into launch right away because they wanted to focus on a completely different market. They obviously asked us, like, what is it that we can do right now in order to kind of like do PR, and for them obviously to kind of make sure that they get some value out of our relationship. And I think that it's actually very useful to kind of sign up with either like Publicize, for example, or to kind of like set yourself to come up with a plan before you actually want to start reaching out to the media, because you have to look at what will make an impact as soon as you do engage with the media. For example, if you were to look at your own website in a very critical way, what do you feel is missing whenever you kind of go to your own website? It might be that you don't have the right explanations to the questions that you know that your clients might be asking. Does the website look okay? Do my social media channels look up to date? Is my branding all like spot on? That's obviously all kind of like things that you can kind of look into, like in order to kind of like be ready for PR. But it might also be figuring out whether or not you have like a good narrative. You can set yourself up with an entire plan of like, I want to be reaching out to the media with these kind of topics at that moment. So for example, when we go back to like media monitoring, you might already kind of be one step ahead of that by finding out like, hey, what are specific holidays that will have like a certain theme that I might be able to kind of take advantage of as an entrepreneur at a certain point, and set yourselves up to kind of have all of that ready, so that as soon as you do start engaging with the media, as soon as you do have your like company set up and like launched, that you're ready to go.
Okay, and if you're ready to go, I have a question from Anderson. Would you go about this by sending like letters, press releases directly to media personalities? So you have a writer and you're going to print out a letter or the press release, you put it in an envelope, you put the address, and you send it out. Would you do this?
Obviously, that's an interesting question. I'd say that I personally wouldn't do that. Why is that? I think that like in 2019, there's already like so many journalists that do everything digital. So we actually know from working with clients for over the last years, obviously, that lots of journalists actually prefer the kind of the digital way, because let's face it, if you were to send an email, or sorry, a letter, like a physical letter to a person with your press release, that would also mean that they would have to copy the entire text by actually typing like letter by letter and making sure that everything has the right way. You cannot really include like hyperlinks, etc. So the question is like, why would you even? If you like to do that as a personal touch, if that's close to what you do with your branding, let's say you have a company that like has like a robotic arm that actually writes letters, then obviously then that might be interesting to do and kind of like have like a quirky spin to it. But in the other case, like, yeah, like I would probably not.
Is there anything that you would send to journalists?
By mail, you mean? I think.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would send to them by mail? That would make sense.
Absolutely. Like, let's say that you have a specific product, and you want to make sure that they have the actual product to kind of play around with it and to kind of experience it hands on. Sure, yeah, make sure that you can send it to the journalist. However, from like, especially like nowadays, it's not very common to actually just send stuff to a journalist and assume that they will then decide to kind of like cover your story or cover your company. So I would probably engage first with the journalist, find out if they do want to either review your product or kind of get into that. And as soon as you kind of have the green light there, make sure that you send over whatever they need in order to kind of get that review or get that article out the door. And if as soon as that does happen, make sure that you do follow up in order to kind of like materialize that kind of product review or service.
From your experience, do you think journalists would not be very happy if you're sending them presents or things like that?
It depends. I think that there's obviously going to be individuals that do like getting a gift every now and then. However, it might also be that you get like lots and lots of stuff delivered to your house. So, me personally, I would not want to have that basically. And from our experience working with people, like I would say, like don't do it. Like make sure that you get a sign up first, and then kind of engage with the journalist. Also, how do you know their address even? Like that's probably like the first question I would have if something would get delivered to my door from an individual that's actually looking to kind of have something covered. That's a good question. I definitely do see the value in um, I definitely do see the value in getting a press release to send out and having them published. But the question is, how self-promotional is your press release, and why would a journalist or publication actually care about your announcement? So that's probably the assessment, the real assessment that you want to do. Do people actually want to find out about this, or am I just going to be one of the other million people that send out the press release? For example, when a company such as Coca-Cola changes headquarters, that will be covered. But if you change from WeWork to WeWork, yeah, no one probably will want to know about that.
Great, thank you so much. I have a question for Jordan. So, and this is again relating back to measurements. And he says, are there any measurements outside of the size of the publication that are important to take into account when developing a PR strategy? Any other measurements?
Definitely. I'd say that the size of the publication is also still very relevant. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, great. I'd say that the size of the publication is still very relevant in terms of like how many people do I want to reach out to. But let me paint you a picture. Like if you reach out to a publication in the TechCrunch, and let's say they have like 10 million viewers on a monthly basis, how many of those 10 million will actually want to find out about your specific business in medtech? Probably not as much. How many of those people were actually like the executives that you need to reach out to in order to kind of like make an impact and kind of reach that business goal that you formulated yourself? That's also like a lot smaller. So if you look at the absolute size of a publication, you might also kind of want to focus on more of the kind of the niche industry verticals by actually reaching out to those medtech publications, because you do know that the decision makers actually read about the industry there. So that it might have more of an impact to you as a business because you are putting yourself directly in front of that specific target audience that you do have.
And that's very interesting, because when I've been thinking about it myself, and then I think, for my personal projects or whatever it is that I'm doing, why would I want to be on a publication? And I wanted to ask you directly, because you've worked with a lot of people, you've worked with a lot of companies, you've heard a lot of their motivations. Why do companies want to be featured on these publications? Because they are not going checking out their domain authorities. They are not checking out like how many like followers do they have. What are some of the reasons that they give you? Why do they want PR?
So they like when most clients sign up with us, or when most entrepreneurs kind of decide that they want to start doing PR, they realize that PR can make an impact on reaching their business goals. So as soon as they have that, then they engage with us, they formulate a plan, and they start working on what do I want to do and what do I want to do when, basically. I'd say that why do they actually engage with PR? That's probably because they realize that the PR is a great way to like reach your business goals. So when they start building that plan and starting formulating what they want to do, they kind of look into all the factors that come into mind, and they realize that in like next to, for example, advertisement, PR might be something very good to do.
That's great, because now I have a follow-up question on that from Trent. He's basically asking, how do you know when your PR has worked? So if you know it's going to have an impact on your business goals, like how do you know that has actually worked? Is there a point where you can say your PR has been successful and stop? Or is it something you need to go through your business life cycle? How does it work?
Um, I'd say that you definitely don't want to stop as soon as you start getting success. How do you access whenever you have the success? It's definitely whenever you kind of like see that spike in your business goals. So let's say that you do want to have more people go to your website, and then from those kind of like articles published, then converting clients. That is when you have success, and that's when you know that you have something that works. And then you have to decide whether or not you find that that works also for a second and a third time, or if that's something very topical and you should like diverse yourself and kind of move forward with something new.
Okay, and I have a one final question for you. And is, do most startups have one person dedicated to media monitoring, and then one person for pitching, and then one person for writing the articles? Or is it something that is traditionally managed by someone who wears multiple hats? How does this work?
I'd say that ideally you would have people that are jacks of all trades. So for example, let's say that you have someone that is doing the media monitoring and then only pushing forward to the ideas to someone else, let's say a writer, to then kind of follow up on that. If you have that, then there might be already like a certain part that goes missing in translation, going from one person to another. You can also kind of reason it the other way around, is that if you do know a writer that is kind of writing a story for a specific kind of publications that you kind of identified that you really want to be on, but that writer writes an article that doesn't fit the editorial guidelines or doesn't fit kind of the tone and narrative or the voice, basically, yeah, then you're probably not going to end up with the results that you want. So that's why it's always good to kind of like go over all of those different steps that you mentioned throughout this webinar before, so that you can kind of actually like put all of those pieces together, because it's definitely kind of like a team effort.
All right, sure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you, Eddie, for having me today. My pleasure.
Excellent. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And as I mentioned on our presentation earlier, we will have free consultations available for every single one of you that it's interested in learning more about Publicize, learning more about what we are able to do for you. Remember, we have a lot of resources in the Resource Center, and we will be sending you this webinar recording right after it. So thank you so much for joining us. And remember, Hakuna Matata.